What does the artist do in society? People think of art as something that must be beautiful, it must be entertaining, it must be challenging. I think that art could be useful. Artists are actually, they're important. How can they contribute? How can they participate? How can they show up? They hold a mirror up to the world we're in, and they document how it felt to be here now. I like the idea that artists can express themselves with whatever they want. If Tiffany can market at me and advertise to me, then why can't I use that and remix that? For too long, these people have been showing up and want the best of both worlds. Whether people paint with Tiffany blue or not doesn't change how many rings Tiffany are going to sell this Christmas. It's a copyright infringement when I start selling rings that say Tiffany on them. I'm literally dying. Everything they tried sort of didn't work. I flatlined, completely died, then was back. Moments like that, you find yourself bargaining with some higher power. If you make me live, I'll make art. How about that?
Stuart, how are you, my friend?
I'm all right. Yeah, it's good to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I've been looking forward to talking to you because a lot of your art, I feel, is extremely thought-provoking, and you talk about this social function that art should have, and I just wanted to delve in about like kind of where your thought process is of that. But before we go in, as of every episode, I just want to take it a little bit back with a bit of background. So childhood, what was childhood like for you? Growing up, school?
I don't know. I mean, it was an interesting, I mean, everyone's childhood's different, isn't it? So I sort of grew up in what you could call a poor working class family, I suppose, is how you define it. But poor, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but poor in terms of money, but rich in terms of love.
Same as me.
And I think that was really important. I was very academic, which people find very weird. So
it's interesting.
Super smart. Like out of the whole county, I got like the highest score in my SATs.
Really?
So, yeah. So my whole school and my parents and everything really wanted me to like go be a doctor and do this kind of thing. So my whole childhood was spent sort of in two worlds. So I had this sort of art thing going on and this passion for art, which kind of came from my grandmother more than anything else. And then this super high achieving academic thing. And I almost sort of hid the art for most of my childhood, but it was the thing that I really loved.
That's
so that
really
was weird.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you've academically very intelligent. You always like art, but you hide it. Why are you hiding it? Is that a social fitting in element?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think there's a few things. I think the first thing is like artists don't get paid and they end up chopping their ear off and die, which is basically what my parents told me. And also I didn't realise that people were alive and making art. I thought it was all in the history books. So I went to see a Van Gogh at the National Gallery when I was a kid. But I also saw, and obviously I thought he was like a dodo, you know, because it was in a museum. I didn't realise people were still making stuff. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I saw contemporary art, living people making things. So I didn't really realise it could really be a profession. So it was just this sort of private thing I did in my room to make sense of my life. But it was never really going to be a job or anything real, you know.
I've never thought of it like that, but now you've said it, it resonates with me. Growing up, all the artists you were taught about are not alive anymore.
Yeah.
It was always in history museums or history books about the art they did.
Yeah, it's just like a dinosaur bones. Like you walk through and all that one was painted 1500s and it's some boring thing. And
when you started doing some art as a nipper in your bedroom, how old are we talking?
Well, I always drew and painted, so
literally
I just didn't stop. I mean, every kid's doodling with crayons, right? So that. And then I guess when I was about 7 or 8, I really, really fantasized about this set of oil paints that are in the window of this shop that I'd walk past.
Okay.
And one day I came home and like they were on my bed and my parents had got them. And then I started like copying Van Gogh paintings using sticks and stuff. And I just went all in at that point and it was just all I wanted to do.
Wow. So the initial stuff that you were painting were kind of like imitations of the famous paintings out there.
Yeah.
What was the first thing you remember painting or drawing that was kind of your own?
That's really interesting. I don't think I sort of found my own voice in painting until I was probably 18 or 19.
Got you.
You know, I could draw a shoe at art school or a set of objects, or I could copy something, but it wasn't me saying anything. I think it was a lot later.
What about school? How was school for you?
really tough.
Yeah.
School was terrible. So in those days, if you were a geeky weirdo like me, you just got picked on. Basically, you just didn't fit in. I mean, now it's cool to be different.
Yeah.
But at that age, it really isn't. So it was really tough. And whilst I was academically very smart as well, I was like the square, straight, stiff kid who obviously got picked on for being in all these top classes for things. And at the same time, I was obsessed with like music and art and culture. So I didn't really fit in either way, you know. I couldn't really hang out with the cool kids because I was this geeky, straight science kid. And I didn't really fit in with those because I was like, but I want to listen to Nirvana.
Yeah, I love Nirvana.
Right. So I was just on my own.
I haven't admitted that for years either.
Yeah. But I was a loner, basically.
Yeah. It's interesting because that era as well, you've got like, I feel like the creative kids weren't as cool in the era you were probably at school, and even that I was at school. I don't know what our age difference is, to be honest. How old are you?
I'm 42.
I'm 34, so it's not too different.
Yeah.
But like you said now, the creative kids are the cool kids now.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas if you were creative a decade ago or 2 decades ago, you were a bit of like an outcaster, a bit weird.
Totally, yeah.
You didn't quite fit into the norm.
No, not at all.
That's why I found it interesting. So you're academically very intelligent, but you're also creative, which is a really unique mix. And your parents and the era wanting you to be a doctor or a lawyer, I think that's pretty normal as well for the times.
Oh, definitely, because you want what's best for your kid.
Yeah.
And like we were
you
living
want them to earn, and they probably don't think you can earn from art.
Yeah, they believed that. And
how was your relationship with your parents?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, really good.
On the whole?
Yeah,
They supported the art stuff when you came out saying that you wanted to do it? No.
No. So, yeah, I mean, that was a really fractious thing. And it's interesting that you say came out and said you want to do it, because it really felt like that. So there was a point in my teenage years where it was like, you know what, I want to do art. And I remember driving in the car with my mum, and my mum was a university lecturer, sociologist. That's a whole other amazing story, by the way, about my mum. But driving around, and I said, you know, I don't want to do A-levels, you know, I want to go to art school. And it was like, you're going to die. And it was this really emotional thing. And I enrolled to do the A-levels to please her, really. And I did these 4 A-levels and also the art course. So I did both. And actually, I dropped out of the A-levels and I stayed at the art college. And I wasn't actually enrolled at the art college for the full-time course, but I just didn't leave. And I kind of populated an area. And I remember the head of department going, Stuart, you're not enrolled, you know, and you're under 18. I need your mum to sign this form or you can't come.
Was she signing it? No.
And they managed to talk her into it.
Okay.
And it did get signed. And then obviously, you know, my mum became a great supporter of my work and understood what I was doing, and you know, was proud of me later. But at that time, it wasn't easy.
I say the term came out about it because I feel like when we're growing up, our parents sort of probably have unintentionally some expectations of us. You know, what's a societal norm? What have they grown up seeing?
Yeah.
And you're obviously veering off from, she's, you know, a university lecturer, as you said. Mm. So she probably presumed you'd go down that route.
Yeah.
Do you think that until they understand, they didn't support? Is that just because they probably didn't understand?
Yeah, they didn't understand. And, you know, I could have become a doctor. No problem.
Yeah.
You know? But it wasn't what was in my heart, you know.
So your grandma's the reason you started painting? She used to paint?
Yeah, so my grandmother painted, but she also had art books. All the Impressionists, Pissarro, sculptors like Rodin. So I saw all of that. And she grew up in India and she had amazing stories. Wow. Yeah, and I used to spend a lot of time with her. And then my granddad, his dad was a carpenter, so he was very handy and he made stuff in his garden garage. Yeah. So every weekend I'd be with my granddad, like making something like a birdhouse or a magic table or something. So I started and I'd paint all the things. And so I was always kind of making. So I had my nana with the art and then my granddad with like this making thing.
Yeah. Grandparents are the best.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, they are the best. If you weren't doing art, what would you be doing?
I don't know.
Honestly, nothing else?
Nothing. I'd be dead. Like, I think so, because there's nothing else I could really do.
Well, it sounds like you could do quite a bit from an academic perspective, but I guess it's what you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I mean, I could get a job in a bookshop or something.
Yeah, maybe. You grew up in Bournemouth, right?
Yeah.
And your art, you've kind of travelled everywhere around the world doing your art. But what's made you resettle in sort of Dorset and Bournemouth when you could be anywhere in the world?
Question. I mean, there's lots of things. I sort of realised that as I've got a bit older and I've, got a family now, that London changed a lot, which is a huge thing. And when I first moved there, I lived in Shoreditch. I was part of a very vibrant art scene that slowly changed through sort of gentrification, politics, how the government treated the closure of certain places that we'd hang out, all the nightclubs changed. The whole scene was different. And I really felt like, actually, I'm paying all this money to be in this city, but I was working internationally. So all my work was going to China, I was going to Italy, New York. So I was like, actually, London's not relevant to me anymore. And I always loved it here. I actually love it. I really love where I live.
Yeah, I love it. I think we're very, very lucky to live where we live.
Yeah.
You're at what point do you think, I'm just trying to think then, I'm just taking it back a little bit. Do you feel that the art took off for you? As in, not you enjoying to do it, but actually getting noticed by people, or maybe starting to sell a few pieces, or, like it being in shows and stuff. When did you become kind of famous for your art, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know. So there's two parts to that. I think the first thing was when I was studying, I had a near-death experience. And we can talk about that, which is interesting. But following the near-death experience, I said to myself, I'm going to be a professional artist. And I made this promise to myself. I had this little terrace house that I was renting. And I said to myself, every week when the landlord comes over, I'm going to have, I think it was like £60. I would have it. And it will only be from art. And that was the rule. Wow. And I read, it's quite interesting, you might be into this, but it was a Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Yes. I read that.
Yes.
And there was a part in that book where he talks about sort of burning your bridges. And I was like, do you know what? The only way I'm going to do this is with my art. So I discovered putting my things on eBay, and I made 3 pictures a day as a way to cope, because I had this big mental health thing going on after the near-death thing. And I put 3 pictures a day on eBay, and they sold. And from the ages of, by the time I was 21, I'd sold 3,000 original works of art on eBay to people all over the world.
Wow.
And that...
Huge achievement.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't expensive things. They were like 30 quid. But I always had the money. And I felt like I was a professional artist. And then in terms of like fame or getting known for it, that's very gradual. That's like 20 years of keep doing it. It's not
like an overnight thing like you see on television or anything.
Not for me anyway, no.
No.
Very gradual.
Talk to me about that near-death experience.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well,
you happy to talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I just want to say it right, really. So I was studying in the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, my degree, and I had always this strange feeling that if I came home to see my mum, something weird would happen. It's really strange. So I'd always put it off.
Okay.
And then I was travelling down, and I bought a sandwich from a motorway service station, and I ate it, and I was allergic to it. And my lips swelled up, my throat swelled up, my tongue swelled up, I couldn't breathe. And I was in a car with my girlfriend at the time, and we decided it'd be faster if I got on the train. But we didn't have enough money for both of us to get a train, so I got the train on my own. So I'm getting this train on my own, literally dying on the train, get out, somehow get into a cab, sort of flop on my mum's doorstep, haven't seen her for the best part of a year. I'm literally dying, and they take me to the hospital, and they tried to treat it like an allergy with adrenaline and cortisone, whatever, but it just didn't really work. And they took me up to a ward, which was really interesting because it was the ears, nose, throat ward, that they could watch my throat, which is really like, why would I be there? And everything they tried sort of didn't work. Like, it wasn't responding like an allergy. And they were sort of said to me, look, Stuart, like, it's not a case of like, if you're going to go, it's when you're going to go. So we've invited your family in and all the rest of it. So at the age of like, I was a teenager, I go through this, like saying goodbye to my sister and my nana and my mum. And then I don't even know. And then they left. And it was like 2 a.m. and the doctor came, and he'd got this bag of like plasma stuff from another hospital. And he said, I've got this idea. It's a last ditch thing, but I reckon if we put this like drip on you, it might do something, because they just couldn't. It was just closing up. Like,
so they didn't know what was going on, really.
They couldn't get their head around it. It wasn't doing what normally happens. Normally, they give you the adrenaline and you're all right, but it wasn't doing that.
Antihistamine or something.
Yeah, it wasn't doing that. And they, so they gave me this bag, this drip. and I was allergic to it. So my whole body just hived out and I flatlined, completely died. I just died. And then was back and was like, if I live, this is going to sound really corny, but I was but it's going to sound stupid, but if I live, I'm going to make art. That was the deal. So this sounds really strange. I don't believe in God, but moments like that, you find yourself bargaining with some higher power.
Yeah.
And you're like, I tell you what, if you make me live, I'll make art. How about that?
Wow.
So then I was in this mad situation where I'd made this odd deal with some sort of weird divinity that this is what I was going to do. So I came out of hospital, couldn't speak for a few weeks. Everything was really kind of manky, and they tested me to see what I was allergic to. And in those days, it wasn't like it is now. It wasn't like lab-based. They'd pinprick your back with lots of stuff.
And see which one flares.
See which one flares up. And they tested me for 110 things, and 55 of them pinged up. And they couldn't tell me which of the 50% of things in the world would kill me. So this is when all the anxiety disorder started making this new kind of art that actually felt like it was mine as a way to cope. And that's kind of what happened. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the story of that.
Do you remember anything from that flatlining?
Mm.
Did you see anything? You know what they say about these out-of-body experiences?
Yeah, so I've read every book you can find on it.
I can imagine.
Like,
do you recall any of that?
Yeah, I do. So it's not like my experience of it wasn't typical of what I've heard other people say. So there's no tunnel, there's no light flashing behind, there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
You're not floating above looking at yourself.
No. But what it was like, so I can't really describe it, like consciousness itself was becoming one with everything. So I was losing a sense of individuality. Mm-hmm. So I was becoming everything gradually, and it was very, very beautiful and very, very nice. But this is the interesting thing. I felt like I had a decision, and I didn't go along with it. I was like, no. And I came back.
Wow.
And I felt like I felt like I was in control of that experience. Now, if I'd have been a bit older, if it had happened to me a bit further in life, I was 60, 70, and I've done everything I wanted it, I would absolutely have drifted into it because it was beautiful. But I felt I had a choice.
So it was almost like drawing you in.
Yeah.
And you've consciously gone, no, I'm not ready for this yet.
Yeah, not right now.
I'm going back.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, we're going to jump ahead here now, but I was going to ask you about the work you do with Mind, because you're an ambassador for National Mind, a mental health ambassador. I am for Dorset Mind, the local version. Yeah. How and why that came about was one of the questions I was going to ask you, but judging by that, I'm guessing that after that experience, you struggled a little bit?
Yeah. But that's not why I ended up working with Mind.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, I did. So I really struggled. So here you've got a teenage male who's nearly died and has been told he's basically could be allergic to anything and it might happen again at any time. So what happens is you instantly get an eating disorder because you're scared to put anything in your body that might kill you. You're scared to go out and touch anything. And very quickly, you get a full-blown anxiety disorder. Now, the thing that people who haven't experienced anxiety might not understand is the actual symptoms are extremely physical. Your throat closes, your breathing increases, it's hard to swallow, you sweat, things get a bit blurry. It's exactly like an allergy. Mm-hmm. It's indistinguishable. So
yeah, I think a lot of people wouldn't realise that. When you say anxiety, they probably think of...
Yeah, so it can be extremely physical. So when I would have a panic attack or anxiety, it would feel like an allergy. So my system would go, oh my God, it's happening again. You're going to die. So it'd be like, oh God, I can't swallow. Oh shit, I'm allergic to something. Oh no. And it would just go in these cycles. And I was calling the ambulance like, I'd say 4 times a week. And they'd take me in. And they didn't realise it was a mental health problem. This was going on for ages. I'm going in.
Oh, so they're looking for physiological issues with you?
They're looking, is it swelling? What's going on? We'll treat it like an allergy. We look at his paper. Oh, yeah, he nearly died from an allergy. He's clearly freaking out. It's an allergy. Let's give him the antihistamine. Let's give him a shot of adrenaline. Let's keep him in overnight. It was happening again and again and again. And then one young doctor, trainee doctor, one day said, do you know what? I'm not convinced it's an allergy. I was like, what? Of course it is. I had never even heard of anxiety, right? I'd never heard of mental health, not even used those words.
Well, we're talking 20 years ago as well.
It didn't exist. It wasn't a word. So I was like, right, okay, what does that mean? How do I cope with that? So that's when I started to realise that there was a psychological element to this whole thing, and that the trauma I'd been through had probably set off a chain reaction in my body.
What a scary cycle that must be to go through.
Yeah.
How, there's two parts of this. One, how did you get over that? Like, what did you need to do to kind of be happy within yourself again, so you're not keep experiencing that? Was there something in particular you did to sort of overcome that?
I don't think there's any like one thing, but the art really helped. So
expressing yourself.
Yeah. So I made these things every day, and they were just a way to externalize what I was feeling. Even if I didn't fully understand it, it just got something out. So I made these 3 things a day, and I put them on eBay because it was the only place you could put artwork. And it felt like I was sharing my problems with others in a way, and others kind of related to it. And I guess it was like a talking therapy in some strange way.
But it's almost like your version of journaling. I know we spoke about this before the podcast, but it's kind of your version of journaling,
Absolutely,
isn't it? Expressing yourself. And I said to you then that my dad did a lot of art when I was growing up, a lot of abstract stuff that I probably didn't like at the time or understand. But when I look back now, some of it was quite dark, and I feel like actually he was probably expressing himself. Yeah,
it must have been.
So like getting off his chest what was going on. It's interesting. Yes. How about, I mean, you said you had to say goodbye to your family and parents.
Yeah.
What is that like?
There's nothing worse.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, and it was really, I don't know.
You read these quotes where they say sort of, if I said to you, you had 30 days left to live, how would you live?
Yeah.
You've kind of experienced that in real terms.
Yeah, but there's no warning. But I think the other thing is you're on a lot of drugs. You're very sort of out of your mind. You don't really know what's going on. You've been in hospital, you haven't really been sleeping, your body feels weird. So the whole thing's very disjointed and kind of like, it's not rational like we are now.
Yeah.
And then later on, like my mum passed away a couple of years ago, and I was with her when she went, and I did say goodbye to her, but it was a very different thing. We knew it was coming, and we prepared for that, and this was very sudden.
Yeah.
So
and too early almost.
Yeah, just weird. It's not when you expect that to be happening.
No, I know. The part of that when you're explaining it that kind of resonated with me is I don't believe in any God as such, only because I feel like it divides people when you label a religion. But you are right. Whenever anyone's in any form of real trouble or overwhelmed, they're always pleading with this greater power, right?
Yeah, it's
almost like a natural thing. If I want you, it's not something, nothing to happen to you, I'm like, oh please, let's hope nothing happens to Stuart. But who am I saying please to?
Exactly. Yeah. It's really interesting.
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? What's this being or this spirit that I'm talking to? This greater power, is it even hearing me, or is it our way of our brain tricking ourselves to calm ourselves down by doing that?
Yeah, of course.
It's really intriguing.
It's really intriguing, and that was one of the big questions that came out of that, because you have.
And you still don't believe in God. That's not made you feel.
No, I don't think I believe in God, but I do believe in a sort of an awareness or a universal something,
an energy.
That there is some sort of source of things, but I wouldn't use words like God or anything like that.
I'm the same.
I suppose like I had a lot of questions after it, and I read a lot of books. So I dropped out of art school. So I'm an art school dropout, which is also
interesting.
Make of that what you will. So I don't have the debt that all the other kids who went to art school have got. But I took my own education. Or the degree. But I took my own education really seriously. So I deliberately moved next to Borders bookshop. And in those days, you could go and sit in Borders and read everything. Mm-hmm. So I'd buy a coffee in the morning and sit there. I actually read the entirety of the spirituality section, the marketing section, and the art section, and then went home and painted for eBay. So eBay funded my 3-year education.
Wow.
And I found really interesting things in all of those sections. But the spirituality section was where I was really trying to answer, what was this experience that I had? Mm-hmm. How was I still aware even when I was dead? Like, how does that happen? Why did awareness or my consciousness not stop?
Yeah, that's hard to fathom.
Like, what's going on? Like, is there any clues anywhere about that? Because that's what that kind of stirred up.
Did you find that after that experience, I know you said your art kind of changed a little bit. Did you find that it got darker, what you were drawing or your thoughts or your...
No, I just think
or
that
more enlightened, or like kind of
just more personal and more truthful. Like they just felt like they'd come out of me, like they were my things. They just felt quite honest. And I think before I was trying to I was going through the motions of art school. Yes, I can draw the human form. Yes, I can draw a pair of shoes. Yes, I know how to mix different flesh tones. I know how to stretch a canvas, but I wasn't sort of like doing anything real with it.
The education system is almost like in theory, isn't it? They're teaching you in theory. So in theory how everything works. But when you get into practical, into real life, you have to be able to apply that. And it doesn't always translate as easy as that.
Yeah, and the difference was it wasn't like I was going through the motions. I needed to do it. I needed to make the art. Had to come out some way.
Did you feel you'd made this bond, hadn't you? You'd promised this being or this spirit or this thing that if you lived, for as long as you lived, you were going to make art. So did you ever get to a point where you thought, like, I'm going to quit art, and then you think, I can't quit art because I'm going to get ill again if I quit? Or
yeah, definitely. So
did you have those battles in your head?
Yeah, 100%. So I actually believed fundamentally that me making things
kept you alive.
Was keeping me alive, yeah. And was this deal. So I actually spent a long time with a therapist unpicking this, because I was like, this isn't healthy. Like, this is a really strange root of a lot of weird behaviours that I've put my personal power in the hands of this thing that I don't even believe it exists to start with. And if I don't do this every day, something really bad's going to happen. And that's actually kind of fundamental in like most sort of OCDs actually is a sort of belief that if I don't do X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. So I'd sort of melted these two things together that were actually quite disparate. Your belief in God and your ability to stay alive are probably not really related.
Yeah. Is that all dealt with now in your head? Like, do you have a coping mechanism for it now? Have you ever felt like that since? That feeling, has it come back? The allergies back, or the?
Oh yeah. I mean, I still
do you still get those? It
still happens. Yeah, I've had it. It's less frequent, but a couple of times a month I have quite a bad anxiety. Yeah.
Do you?
And it's normally triggered by like eating out, or those kind of like.
Is that because you don't know what's in the food?
I probably, but I think it's so ingrained now that it's just like the idea of like swallowing something. I don't know. So that I haven't broken.
And how? Let's say we're out and you're having dinner and this happens. How do you deal with it? What do you do? Do you go home? Do you meditate? Do you listen to music? Do you start drawing, painting to try and calm yourself down? Or do you just kind of know it's going to pass now and sort of zone out?
I found that before I would try and hide it. So we'd be like, I show art with like posh art galleries, and the art gallery dinner's a really big thing, right? So I'll be in the middle of like Hong Kong, and they'll invite a load of billionaires, and we'll be in this big long table, and everyone needs me to be the artist, right? And they bring out the food, and it's British food. We've got you the fish and chips, And I'm like, I can't eat it. Please don't make me put this in my mouth. I'm just dreading the whole thing, and like I eat it.
So it starts before you've even eaten.
Oh, mate, just the idea of it. So then I put it in my mouth, and like I can't swallow. Oh shit, I'm an allergy. It's not an allergy. It's anxiety. And then I'm going in this loop, and I used to like pretend it was all okay. And when you bottle it up, you start to get weirder. You start twitching. You start holding things. You start clutching your body. You just look weird, right? Yeah. So now I start to go, do you know what? I'm feeling really anxious about this. I don't think I can eat it. And that's how you fix it, just being honest about the situation and with yourself and the people around you. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does, yeah.
You're socially unacceptable at that point. Everyone else is eating and you're not. But I've grown to be comfortable with that.
And you're given a reason that some people may not even understand because they've never experienced it, or they've not. They don't sort of learn about it as much.
Yeah, but I'm just really honest about it now.
Wow. So at what point do you become a mental health ambassador for Mind? How does that come about?
Well, this is a completely different thing.
Okay.
So my grandmother, after we lost my granddad, who I made things with in the garden shed, she developed late onset schizophrenia.
Okay.
And the narrative she had going on in her head was wild. It was like some detective story, and the woman upstairs was doing this and that and the other. I didn't know what to do. So I reached out to Mind, and they gave me really good advice and support for my nana. I thought, oh, wow, they're amazing, And I thought, I'd like to thank them. So I went back on eBay and I auctioned 10 things.
Donated it.
And gave them the money, just as a thank you. And they said, oh, that's really sweet. Maybe we should meet. And I met them. And I said, look, why don't you do anything with art and mental health? I mean, art really helped me. I think there's something in it. This is a long time ago, and they were like, well, it's sort of a bit anecdotal. There's not really any evidence of that. What do you mean art can help with mental health? And I was like, well, I think it can. Is it something you want to explore? And they said, well, if we're going to set up a fund for creativity and mental health, we need quite a lot of money. We're going to need like 50 grand or something crazy. I said, all right, well, I'll try and raise the money. So I curated a big art show, and all the contemporary artists were very generous, and we had a big auction, and it was wonderful. And we set up the Creative Therapies Fund with Mind so that they could roll out creative therapies across England and Wales for people experiencing mental ill health to go in a therapeutic environment and express themselves in whatever way. So it might be dance or script writing or drawing or painting. And we started to realise like it works. And now we know this. It's normal to know this. But so that was it, and that's how my relationship developed through doing that.
Wow. And that's still going, is it, the creative?
It's still going, yeah. Yeah, it's grown.
That's incredible. I wonder if we've got any of that down here. Have we got it?
I don't know.
Does Dorset Mind do that?
I don't know. I think the local minds apply for a creative grant, and not all local minds see that as an important thing. And in different areas have different requirements, of course, and
that's interesting. I might speak to them because I think that definitely massively help people.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's like night and day. I mean, I've met people.
If you'd have said, I mean, you're talking 20 odd years ago or something, even in those days, if you'd have said journaling helps, they'd have gone, well, there's no evidence.
Oh, yeah.
Exercise helps, there's no evidence, because no evidence of anything back then, really, in terms of mental health and
it's all anecdotal. Some of it's unmeasurable. I mean, when people work out how to measure feelings, but we're not quite there yet. So that you're going to have to take someone's word for it, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. You always talk about your art having like a social function.
Yeah.
And you discuss democracy and youth politics a lot. Why is that important to you?
I think that art could be useful. And I've sort of seen that in the mental health thing, but also in society. I think artists are actually, obviously they're not more important than a doctor or a nurse or a school teacher, but they're important because they hold a mirror up to the world we're in and they document how it felt to be here now. And that's a really important thing to be doing. So if you think art could be useful or provide a social function, like what does the artist do in society? How can they contribute? How can they participate? How can they show up? I think they're really interesting questions. And then you start to make a different type of art, an art that might be useful. Because people think of art as something that must be beautiful, or must be entertaining, or must be challenging. But could art actually be empowering in some way, or something that connects people or brings people together, empowers the people who see it? So I'm interested in that.
Interesting concept, that.
Yeah.
A lot of your art is thought-provoking, isn't it?
I hope so.
Yeah, from what I've seen. You have your art materials business, Culture Hustle.
Yeah.
Now, you've shown me around. I've been lucky to see this.
You've been over,
obviously, you've got the blackest paint, pinkest paint, whitest paint. For any of the listeners or viewers, how do you say it's the blackest paint in the world? I know you've explained to me, but how's that graded? How's that measured? What makes it the blackest paint? And if I painted it on this wall now, how do you guys say it? How can you claim it's the blackest paint, basically, or the whitest, or the pinkest?
Well, you can measure it in a lab. I mean, it's quite simple. You shine a beam of light at something and see how much bounces back, and you get a readout. A spectrometer measures how much light bounces back off something. So a very black thing looks black because it absorbs all the light. The more light it absorbs, the blacker it looks. It's not bouncing any colour back. So the paint I made absorbs 99.8% of visible light, which is almost all of it. There are materials out there that do more than that, but I'd say they're more materials than paints.
And what's an average black? 95?
No, we're close, like 92 maybe.
Really? So it's nearly 10% off being black. Looks black to the naked eye, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the white, I'm guessing it bounces the most amount of light back.
Correct, yes.
But what about the pink? Just bounces a colour back?
It balances a lot of pink back, yeah.
Interesting. Why pink?
Pink's really interesting as a colour.
Okay.
I think it's a really politicised colour. I think it's a really powerful colour.
Yeah.
I think it really makes a statement. And for that project, for me, the pinkest pink was more of a piece of performance art. And if you think about the history of protests, you think about like some of the women's marches and stuff. It's really quite a powerful, punchy thing. It's a very loaded colour.
Yeah,
pink.
I mean, and naturally, I think in society you link pink to female.
Yeah, of
women. That's kind of what the society leads you to believe. You know, when you've got a kid growing up, they either bring you a blue present or a pink present.
Yeah.
So it's like ingrained in us from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very powerful colour. What colour are you going to do next?
I don't know. I've been exploring a few things, but I'm really fascinated by really ancient colours that you can't get anymore. So in the old days, they used to make colours in really interesting ways, like mummy brown was made out of ground up mummies, and
Really?
Yeah, there was red paint made out of what they call dragon's blood. So I'm really interested in this sort of rare pigments that we can't use, and how I can maybe bring them into a contemporary case where they're really usable paints. So today's artists can use great colours from the past that we can no longer use. I think that'd be really useful.
You'd make it synthetically, right? You're not going to put a dead mummy in a
but we'll resurrect some of these
the same colours.
Ancient colours, yeah.
You do some incredible pop-ups in town.
Mm.
I've seen a few. I've been lucky enough to go and visit some of the Triangle stuff.
Oh, you saw it, good.
Yeah, and you're building obviously a nice little art community in Bournemouth, I feel. How are you finding support from like the community, or probably more importantly, the council? Because I've had some interesting dealings with them before.
I mean, there's two sides to it, I suppose. The community's fascinating because there's way more of it than I expected. Mm-hmm. So we opened the doors to the gallery that we have, and you know, they were queued all the way down the street.
I remember seeing the queue.
I was like, what is going on for art in Bournemouth? Like I thought it was one of your club nights or something. You know, normally
around the corner.
Yeah, but no, it was for art. So there are people into it. So that's really lovely, and they've been really supportive of the gallery, and they come to every show and stuff, and it's beautiful. And actually, you know, my experience of the council has been really good. They've really got behind it. They seem to understand what I'm doing. They've been really supportive. I think it, in a way, though, you know, just to be outspoken about it, it ticks a big box because they're not really providing visual culture.
True.
So it's sort of handed on a plate in a way.
Yeah.
So you know, why wouldn't they get behind it? But I do think they care about it, and I think they see the value in it. Some of them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we could do more of it in Bournemouth, which I know you're sort of championing. I've got a friend of mine that's an art dealer locally, Brad.
I know Brad.
You know Brad, yeah. He's always talking about doing some sort of like expedition or something. Yeah. But like, you know, using some funding from somewhere and actually doing a proper year-round something. He feels there's a need for it in Bournemouth.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of wanted to support that. I think art is, we've got the AUB, they're great students. That's a growing university here with the Arts Institute. We do a lot with them at Halo, to be honest.
Do you? Oh, good, yeah,
they do a lot of their parties and nights there, and they always book like slightly alternative artists or slightly, you know, bands that
a bit more
cooler,
interesting,
a bit different that we might not be able to do in the mainstream to make any sort of money out of, but they can do. You opened an artist job centre.
Yeah, I did. That's
installation. True. During COVID with creatives to respond to the government that were kind of telling people to retrain, and we had that in our industry. Talk to me about that. How did that come about? Was that with the AUB guys?
No, it was
local.
No, I did it in London. It was in Covent Garden.
Okay,
and it was a piece of my work. So it was an installation. So I think it was Rishi Sunak said retrain, reskill, reboot.
That whole campaign they did, I remember. That whole campaign
was gross. And the whole art community was really upset. Because it's like, do you not understand? Like, this myth that we don't make any money and we don't contribute is totally ridiculous. I mean, you've obviously seen that in your industry as well. Yeah. It's like, we're not messing about. We make you films. Yeah. We paint you stuff. Don't think that we need to retrain. Like, we spent our whole lives. We're actually really good at this. So I thought it'd be really funny to make a job centre in the centre of London for artists. And it was called the Artist Job Centre. But it was a parody. It wasn't a real job centre. And
you built it?
Yeah, physically built it. It looked like a real job centre down to the last detail. So it looked like it was a 1990s tacky job centre.
Wow.
And in the window it had ads for like crime scene washer, pencil sharpener, and a buzzer to apply for a job. And the whole inside looked like, I mean, it looked real, right? But it was weird because it looked almost too real, and people thought it was real. And we had real artists, like they were, you know, lead violinist for a symphony orchestra pressing the buzzer to apply for a job for an onion peeler.
Bless them.
And it was like, what the earth have we stepped into? Like, they actually would peel an onion.
Just goes to show what the kind of media's making people think.
Yeah, shocking. So that was the Artist Job Centre, and that's what that was about.
I mean, that whole concept of when general society think of art, they think of someone painting something. But you're right, everything's art.
Yeah,
the films we're watching, the music we're listening to,
100%.
some of the food we're eating is art.
Definitely.
Everything around us, art's ingrained. I had the same sort of battle with the nighttime economy. You might remember I did a load of lobbying for that because the sort of elite only saw theatre. They didn't see nightclubs as a thing. So they were trying to save the theatres, but not any nightclubs because they didn't think nightclubs had any sort of relevance. And they sort of told everyone to retrain. And the hospitality sector is still struggling from that now. If you go out and ask anyone, there's a massive staffing issue. So we've got the least amount of people unemployed in history, I believe.
Okay.
But we've got no one wanting to work in hospitality. And that's because a lot of them have retrained. Because obviously we got hit so hard, and the furlough didn't come out for ages, so a lot of them lost their jobs. And if you think of it like this, Stuart, if you were working till 3 a.m. every night dealing with drunks, and on not the best pay, you then suddenly had to retrain as an estate agent. You're now working really nice sociable hours, 9 to 5. You've got your weekends back, your evenings back. You can now build a relationship, have a family. You're not going to go back working nights for less money.
No, I get it.
So kind of once we lost them, we lost them. So there's this sort of like issue in that sector that we're kind of dealing with now at the moment, picking up the pieces, which I think it will carry on for a little bit until we make it look like, that you can have a career in that sector. Yeah,
it might need to rethink itself a little bit.
Needs to remarket itself a little bit. But it is tough. It is tough. Anyone that's aspiring to become an artist, what kind of advice would you give them if they were kind of like trying to break through? And let's say they're 18, they're studying something else at uni, they're doing art secretly at home like you've done because they don't want to tell anyone. Is there like a bit of advice that you'd give to someone, an aspiring artist, or advice you'd given to yourself if you could go back?
I think the main thing is about finding your own voice and the truth in the work, because all the career stuff you can do later. And there'll be a point where you have to show people the things. But really, when you're young, you need to be really cultivating that. And it's not a part-time thing. It's like an all or nothing thing. No one gets really good at something. Even if you've got a talent, without working on it, really, really hard to. Skills are kind of built over time by showing up every day, getting it wrong, getting it right, carrying on, fighting with yourself, wrestling with it. And you have to be doing that. And the best artists are the ones that are showing up to do that. And some of them are still doing it when they're 80 years old. And that's what, it's what I want. I want to still be doing it when I'm 80, right? So
I think what you're saying there is really resonates with me, and I'm sure it will with a lot, and it can be applied to everything. So effectively what you're saying is whether it's art or anything you're doing, you need to be truthful to yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to choose something that you're actually going to be willing to show up for when it's really hard and it doesn't go very well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just going to bail out. And
that's where the enjoyment comes in, right? Because as soon as it gets tough, if you don't really have a passion for it or enjoy it, that's when a lot of people quit anything in life.
Yeah.
Because everything's fun in the beginning until the tough work comes.
Yeah, exactly. And all the growth, you grow really quickly at the start of any new thing. But it's how are you 5 years in? When the novelty's worn off,
Yeah, for sure. Some of your work is quite out there, quite controversial. You've got the Tiffany blue paint.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, where do you think the difference lies between liberation and copyright infringement?
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? So you've got you do a lot of work for art for thought-provoking and liberating art, and it should be for everyone, and that's kind of your stance. And then where's the limitation for you where it then crosses over to potentially copyright or infringement or anything like that?
Stealing stuff.
Yeah. Stealing stuff.
Well, Picasso said great artists steal. And
did he say that? Yeah.
He did say that. And I don't think he's wrong. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun.
I agree with this. I read this somewhere else.
So there's nothing new. So on the other side, if Tiffany can market at me and can put banners everywhere I look and advertise to me, then why can't I use that and remix that and be involved in that? Because for too long, these people have been showing up and want the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So like, you can buy me, but you can't really be involved. Well, I think that's kind of wrong. So I like the idea that artists can express themselves with whatever they want. And I think art's a different category of things. And like I said, I think art's really important. So I think, whether people paint with Tiffany blue or not, doesn't change how many rings Tiffany are going to sell this Christmas. So they really shouldn't have a problem with that. It's copyright infringement when I start selling rings that say Tiffany on them, or little charm bracelets. Right? It's a colour.
It's a colour, and it should be accessible for everyone. I agree with you.
How is it affecting them if someone makes a painting in that blue?
Just know what these big corporates are like.
Yeah, I do. Believe me, I do.
Have you had any drama from that?
Not from Tiffany, but I've had drama, yeah.
You don't mind that, do you? Bit of controversy.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do? I mean, I believe in what I believe, you know.
Yeah. Art, like anything, when you're expressing yourself, is all very subjective, right? And it breeds opinions. How do you deal with any negative feedback on your work? Or have you had any negative feedback on your work?
Yeah, I think nowadays with trolls and internet, you know, you see it much more.
Yeah.
And it's much more immediate. But the problem is that people online with social and stuff, they have such short attention spans. They don't really know everything. You know, they may know one aspect of it. And what I find is the most criticism I get is when I don't behave how they think I am. So in their mind, I'm within these parameters. So the other day I made some T-shirts with a friend of mine. And I thought they were funny and I thought they were artworks and I thought they were accessible. And the Stuart Semple they had in their mind would never do that. So how dare you break the idea I have of you? So how do I deal with it? If I'm totally honest, sometimes I take it way too personally and it eats me up and I care.
Yeah.
And I know I shouldn't. And it's not cool to say that. I don't care. I just ignore it and I carry on.
No, I think it's real.
But I care about my work and I don't actually want to upset people with my work. And, you know, I suppose I do want it to be liked. And I wish I didn't, but I'd be dishonest if I said I didn't care, because I do.
I respect that. And like, if we look at what you said earlier, you've given your life to it. Like, you're very passionate about it, as in art. You know, you've made a bond of yourself that you're going to do this for the rest of your life. You're naturally going to have some passion for that particular subject that you're doing. Do you think, I mean, I was going to ask you, is there anything you've put out that you thought was really good that backfired, but you've answered that, the question, the T-shirts?
Everyone's got an opinion on everything I make.
Do you think there's a cancel culture in art like there is in the celebrity world?
Yeah.
Have you ever had any of that kind of...
I've seen it. I mean, it hasn't happened to me, but I think we're at a time where there's a higher moral standard that's being imposed across the board. And I actually don't think it's cancel culture. I think it's consequence culture.
Interesting.
And I think if you're going to show up and act like an idiot to your community and do the things that you shouldn't be doing and say the things you really shouldn't be saying, maybe there should be a consequence.
Wow. I like that.
So that's a radical way of looking at it. But if we're talking about social media as being social, we're at a house party and you come in and you start saying racist stuff, I might ask you to leave. And perhaps that's fine. And maybe we should be doing that.
I agree with that. I agree with that on the extremes, the examples you've given.
Yeah.
But what about the things where, because it is a funny old space at the moment.
Yeah.
What about the things where you are just voicing your opinion on a particular thing without using anything as extreme, let's say, as racism or thing, but someone else is still getting offended by that? Do you see what I mean? Like, where do you draw the line? Because I feel like we're in this turmoil state at the moment where no one's really being honest publicly. I feel people aren't being as honest as what they're thinking they're not saying, whereas we used to do that a decade ago.
Well, I think the thing is that discomfort is good. And not agreeing is actually a really good thing.
There's growth in that.
Yeah, there's growth in that. So at a lesser level where we're not being overtly
as long as it's not harmful and actually like
So at
hate.
that point, I think we're talking about freedom of speech, which is a different thing. So I think there is a line where it becomes hate. But before it becomes hate, it's freedom of speech. And then
that line is quite subjective though, isn't it?
It is, and it also...
It's different for you and different for me.
Exactly, and people really over-personalise it. So, and I don't know your lived experience, so you may come in contact with something I've made and it really, really upsets you. So we had, in one of the big shows at Giant, we had these suicide vests. They're made of bronze. They were by Jake and Dinos Chapman, very important. Amazing bits of work, really poignant, and certainly not celebrating suicide bombers at all. In fact, the opposite, drawing our attention to it and making a point about it, which is what art should do. But a local MP's brother had been killed by someone who'd worn such a vest. And his experience was completely different. And he wanted to cancel the show and he wanted it shut down.
So it triggered him.
Absolutely. And how do you judge that? So that's the murky territory where we now fall into some.
Did you have to cancel that show?
No, we didn't cancel the show. I mean, obviously it's horrendous what he's been through, and there's no lack of understanding there for him. But it wasn't the place to have that discussion, I didn't think.
Raising attention through art is something you do.
Mm.
I spoke to a friend of mine earlier that I said I had you on the show, and he was like, you got to ask him his opinion on this. And I said, all right, what is it? Because obviously I'm not all together with the art world. And he said, the anti-oil protesters last week, they threw a tin of Heinz orange soup over a Van Gogh painting.
Right.
He was like, I don't think, he goes, it's a really important subject and it should be dealt with. But he said, I don't think they've done it the right way. Ask him his thoughts. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've heard about it because it's your world. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think those anti-protesters have gone about that the right way? No,
I don't. I think they've done it completely wrong. I totally agree with their cause.
Yes, that's kind of what he said.
There's no doubt there that's right. The truth is, Flowing Tomato Sauce, a great artwork in my opinion, and one that actually changed my life. Like, I've got a personal relationship with that work. Is probably the wrong way to go about it. We're not going to fight climate change through that. I mean, they're unrelated things. So the problem we have with some art that looks like it's about an important issue is that we accept bad art because it's about a good cause. So, for example, a really bad painting that might be about how Black Lives Matter, we're not allowed to say this is a bad artwork because it's about a good cause. So actually, the cause is good, but you can be a rubbish artist talking about a good cause. Yeah. And we need to be able to differentiate. Just because something's politically right or morally right doesn't mean that the art expression of it is therefore good art. And we find that with the Van Gogh thing. Just because they chucked it, I totally agree with the oil thing. But actually, that's not the way to articulate the argument. So it's a bad action, but a good cause. And we see a lot of that.
We are, especially recently, over the last few days, I think we've seen the hands being glued to tarmac. We've seen the milk being poured in supermarkets, and when there's people out there that can't afford to eat. Yeah. So the cause is correct, but the way they're going about it is wrong, and it's actually probably creating a divide.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with a bit of good civil disobedience.
Yes.
A bit of mischief making.
I agree.
I'm totally all for that.
And me.
But you do it in a way that's slightly different, and I've done these things a lot, and you can point attention to something or hold a mirror up to something in perhaps a humorous, whimsical, empowering way. And I find then you kind of have conversations with people who can actually change stuff. No one's going to talk to the people who threw the Heinz thing at the thing and have a meaningful discussion about how we might be able to change things, because they're going to think they're idiots.
I agree. And it starts to build resent.
Yeah.
So and then anyone you meet that are fighting that cause, you link them to that particular incident, and you start to sort of like resent the whole thing when you shouldn't, because the cause is really important. Exactly. And we should be dealing with it.
And it detracts from what you're trying to do.
What's your one favourite bit of art that either I'll ask two parts of this question. Favourite bit of art you've done, and a favourite bit of art you feel in history ever that's been done?
This is really difficult, isn't it?
It's a broad question.
Yeah,
but
I mean, things curious. That I've done, I don't really like much of my stuff.
Really?
Yeah, like in all honesty.
So you're quite a tough critic on yourself.
Oh yeah, it's really harsh. Yeah,
I'm not that.
I'm trying to think.
So you're not really happy with any of the stuff you do normally. You always think could be better.
Yeah, that's why I make another one, right? Because if I'd made the best painting in the world, why'd I bother?
I'd quit.
Well, yeah. There's a couple of things I kind of like. I think the first one I made after the near-death experience is important to me. Mm-hmm. And I want to keep it close, and I want to have it, and I would never sell it. But I don't think it's great, but it's kind of important. So probably that
sentimental,
one. Yeah. I'm attached to it.
Yeah.
And then things other people have made. I mean, there's so much, and different things resonate at different times.
Is there one piece that you could buy, steal, borrow, take, whatever, that you haven't put as like on top of your mantelpiece and think that's the one I want? Physical bit of art. I don't
know, because I think,
or not really.
This is going to sound weird, but this is going to sound really weird. I don't think art is an object. I think art's an experience.
Interesting, yeah.
So I've stood in front of a David Hockney swimming pool painting, and I've cried, real tears. I've also stood in front of that painting on another day and felt absolutely nothing. So I don't feel like I need to own it and put it over my
Got it. But you just want to be able to visit it and see it when you feel you need to.
Yeah, yeah. So if I could choose anything, I'd probably choose Tate Britain.
Yep.
Because I can go there and I like the environment and I can really look at art.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I completely swerved the question, but I can't answer it.
No, it completely makes sense because actually it also partly explains this whole mindset you have about art being accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
So you're not like, because you've got some of these collectors that have probably got some of the nicest pieces in the world hidden away in storerooms or lockers or safes, just gaining money as opposed that they should be. And this is what kind of Brad was saying, these things should be shown. People should 100%. Be able to see them, feel them and look at them sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was the story of my life for 20 years. I made a series of things and we had a show and then 2 or 3 rich people would buy it and then it would disappear. And I just can't live with that.
Are you not open to that as much anymore? So if someone came along and said, I really like this piece, Stuart, I want to buy it, and it's going to go to my house in Monaco and no one's going to see it, would you almost turn the money down because you'd want the art visible now?
It depends who they are. And, if they're going to really live with it and love it, then that's one thing. But, if it's some sort of big foundation that have got a database of 200 million artworks, probably less interested in that. I don't make enough stuff anyway in a year to be that open to that anymore, really.
What's the future hold for you?
I don't know. I'm just keep doing it.
Just keep making art?
Yeah, whatever happens. If the world does something, I'll make something in response, I suppose. And
I like that.
Yeah.
Stuart, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's genuinely been so nice to chat to you.
Good.
Real good insight into sort of like all that creativeness behind and the man behind the man, if you know what I mean. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.